to talk about Final Fantasy 13. When we were, you guys don't even know. When I was putting together the panel, I was emailing the ladies and being like, okay, let's start a list going of all the characters that we want to talk about, and just the hate came out. It was like post-traumatic stress disorder. I mean, I had to review that game for GamePro, and I just remember, like, for months afterward, like, every time somebody even said the word lightning, I would just stiffen, like, let it go, gotta let it go. Alright, so the main character in this game is a woman, and that was a big selling point for Square Enix in the beginning. It's like, she's this strong and sassy female character, and you guys are gonna like her. I did not like her. I really, really did not like her, mostly because of the writing, though. I mean, she's not portrayed as particularly oversexed or anything. I mean, I've heard, like, a half-hearted complaint that maybe her neckline is too low, but in the age of Bayonetta, that is like a nun right there. So, you know, that was the beginning, is that this character was supposed to carry the story, and she wound up being upstaged by Zaz, who was a much better written character. In fact, he's probably the only character with any amount of writing that's done. So, but then we also have Fang and Vanille, and that got a lot of discussion of this group. I'm actually going to pass it to you because you had some of the extra points.
Well, I found out after I had played the game and had some, like, I liked Fang as the character I was playing because at least she wasn't like, when? You know, she was like, no, we just got a thing to do. It's just freaking stab some people. But I found out during development, Fang started out as a guy and was switched to a woman about halfway through. And when you find that out, you're like, of course, that makes so much sense. Because she's not, I mean, as a character, a gender-neutral character, there's not a lot of motivation there, and there's not a lot of depth to it. But as a woman, she's basically, she could be a dude or a girl. It's just like, it's just a cardboard character. This person's gruff and tough. This person is the Oron of this game, is basically what she's like. You know, there's nothing in there that makes her male or female, and all of this gender switch did was make a semi-likable female character that kind of had weird lesbian vibes towards Vanille, which is explained when you find that out later.
Now, Vanille is the one I hated the most.
That actually touches on something, one of the other misconceptions.
Let's have a moment of T-Rex arms, just right now.
I ate a little violent. At least it's not Ivy. But that does touch on something else that I want to talk about. Is another misconception is that we want all female characters to be strong, badass, kicking, like just taking names and cutting your head off. No. We just want well-developed characters. You know, there is no one female trait. You know, we would love to see some vulnerable characters. We would love to see strong characters. We would love to see a mix because that's what people are actually like. So, yeah, like, the character that I hold up as my for this is Ripley from Aliens. Because, yeah. Right? Because, you know, girlfriend will, you know, strap on the ammo and she will go down and she will take on, you know, a horde of aliens, but why is she being so tough? It's because of her maternal instinct. You know, it's because she's reaching out to her, for all intents and purposes, her child. Her child is in danger, and she will do whatever the hell she has to protect her child. And that is a very delicate place to come from. It's very, you know, very vulnerable and very soft place to come from. And I think it contrasts with the tough nature of her beautifully. And it makes her such a lasting and fascinating character. When was the last time you saw that in a game?
Only once, and that was Metal Gear Solid Snake Eater with the boss. That is as close as I have ever seen a Ripley in video games. The boss functions as a kind of maternal figure. I mean, a lot of the male characters actually have these really weird interactions with her where they just start to unload on her the way you might with your mom. Like, there's a lot of love there, there's a lot of hate, there's a ton of betrayal. Like, that's actually how you're introduced to her, is like the Snake character yelling at her like, you left me, the way that any man might yell at his mother. She drops him off at college, you left me. Yep. That's what had to happen. So the boss does not actually do a lot of philosophizing. I mean, she doesn't really spend a lot of time talking too much compared to other characters in the series. But she just presents this kind of strong, pulsing point, focal point, and it's only later that you find out about these layers of vulnerability. I mean, she fell in love with one of her partners that she then had to kill as an assignment, who was the father of her child. She gave birth on the battlefield. What? She shows you like her hideous like cesarean scar at the end, and it's like, what? But she just really was a more believable character than anybody else in that series, and she didn't have to go to a place of or ginormous tits to achieve that. And so I really hold her up as this is how I want my women to be.
Yeah, I'll clap for that. Kathleen, you were saying about give us a character that is just written and well constructed. It doesn't necessarily have to be one thing or the other. Just make it real.
Yeah, I think there's tons of really tough, cool female characters out there. You know, there's lots of Motoko Kusanagis, you know, in various forms. And that's great. Motoko Kusanagi, post Shiro kind of going crazy, before that, is a really good, well-written character, and she's just sort of tough and, you know, butch, which is fun. And then there's a million Princess Peaches, but there's very few.
I hate Princess Peach. I just gotta pick that out.
I mean, I'm not a Motoko Kusanagi, and I'm not a Princess Peach, but so it's very hard for me to find a character I would personally identify with in a video game, you know, who's like, okay, I have some flaws and I have some weaknesses, and maybe I can't do everything on my own, and I think that's okay, and that's so rarely expressed with video games. You were saying that Yuna is a good example of that. Yuna from Final Fantasy X?
That was me. I'm
sorry. Oh, sorry. You were saying that Yuna is a good example.
Yeah, Yuna I would take over Lightning any day. I prefer her as a character. I know that she has a bit of the wang going on, and she's having a hard time. And she does a few girly things that are a little silly, but they're believable. And she's okay with the fact that she's a woman in love with a man who's like a ghost or whatever. Sorry.
But she's also okay. She's like, you know, as this game goes, okay, major spoilers now. She's kind of upset about that, but when you as the player realize what she's known all along, that she's going to die. She's doing this, and she knows she's going to die at the end of this, you're like, okay, I can get behind that, and I can see why she might be having some issues and feeling very sad about getting feelings for Titus during the game, knowing that she and everybody with her is going to die. And that's really believable and well written, I think.
Because I don't want to throw out just that I hate Peach and without any justification. Let me explain why. Because I recognize that a princess is a trope. A princess needs to be rescued to give you something to do in the game. I'm fine with that. That's great. Peach is capable enough to save herself. She's just lazy. Bitch just chooses not to. Now, you contrast her with someone like Yorda from Eco, who is this fragile, helpless creature who will die without you.
Nice picture, Tracey.
That's someone who genuinely needs rescuing. And this goes back to what we were talking about before. We don't need all of our female characters to be soldiers and ninjas and, you know, FBI agents. They can be fragile creatures, but make it believable.
I actually like Peach, but that's a self-hating exercise because she's just so dumb. I mean, she has her own game. I don't know if you played it, but it's Super Princess Peach. Where she cries. Yeah, you can cry on stuff, and like where she has like little rage fits to set things on fire. I mean, it's like, yeah. I mean, it's basically just like dealing with a 3-year-old essentially. I mean, if children can be funny, then so can idiot grown women.
One of the other things I wanted to touch on before we turn to Q&A. How many of you are familiar with the game Enslaved? Okay. For those in the audience who don't know, Enslaved takes place in a dystopic future. There's been a huge catastrophe. Most of society is completely gone. People, you know, very kind of Mad Maxy. Trip, the female, and Monkey, the male, are both on a slave ship. They both manage to escape. she puts a slave collar on his head so that he will have to help her get home because she can't do it by herself. And I really loved this character of Trip because she recognizes her own vulnerability and uses her brain, the tools she has at her disposal, and this great big hulk of a guy to further her own ends, which is to get the hell home. The reaction on the Escapist forums to this game was beyond. They were so pissed. They were so offended. It is an overwhelmingly male audience. That bitch enslaved him and he liked it. This game is repulsive. Clearly they're looking to Betty Page. So I was wondering if you ladies think that they just don't understand the material, they are just too mature to appreciate the relationship, or is it just, I like it just because the girls are.
Well, I think maybe they're just not used to seeing a female character take the central role. I mean, obviously you can switch between the two and control both, but it's basically a woman telling Monkey what to do all the time, and maybe they're just not used to seeing a strong character like that that's, you know, interacting with a male and telling the male what to do. I don't think that usually the female takes the sort of background assistance role.
But do you think that's why, perhaps, like that reaction, that violent reaction, do you think that's why we don't see more female protagonists? Because the audience just isn't ready.
I don't know about that. I actually want you to bring up Sophie right now with Housewife Castle.
Yeah. And you brought up a very good point. That she's not technically Miyazaki's character. But the whole thing was very heavily rewritten. And I think Sophie is a really, really good lead character because she's very dedicated and she's a sort of a plain, studious, hardworking person already. And then she gets, when I first saw this movie, it blew my mind. She gets possibly the worst thing that can happen to you as a young woman is you can be turned old and ugly. That's horrible. Psychologically, that would be horrible. That would blow my mind. I don't know what I would be able to do, right? And so she's just like, you know what? Screw it. I don't care. I'm gonna do what I need to do. I'm gonna go find this guy who's been told to tear the hearts of virgins out, and I'm going to make him help me. But I'm also going to embrace my nurturing maternal instinct, and I'm going to take care of him. Even though when I realize he's not a horrible person, I'm going to help people along the way. And she is so well written because she is so vulnerable, and she is so helpless and dependent on Hal, but at the same time she doesn't let him push her around. She's like, no, this is what we need to do. And she's such a good, deep character. And what I really like about Miyazaki as a whole is that all his female leads are wonderfully written. They are like, yes, I'm going to fall in love, or I've got something I need to do, or I've got these really terrible problems, like my parents have been turned into pigs and I'm really sad, and I'm 6, but I am going to do what I need to do, but they don't do it in a way that makes them incredibly one-dimensional. They're so well written.
See, that's the thing, as I compare Sophie then to Trip, and that their character is defined in their relationship to a male character. And I think that that's a subtlety that gets lost out on because we don't see women in games referred to as characters. They're more just plot devices to drive the game forward. Whereas in Housewife Castle, it's a movie and you're just sitting there passively, and so it's totally okay for you to watch it unfold in front of you because that's what it's doing. So maybe they just missed the point.
And quickly, oh, sorry. See, I was going to get back to what Susan said earlier. To answer your question, I think the majority of gamers are ready to embrace that kind of character. I think the game industries are doing enough to create those characters, and I don't think they've grown up enough.